Hello, I'm Ralph Lorkins, and I'm here to give you some information on how Claranet can help you to create, test and deploy your software and applications to benefit both you and your end users and customers. As you're attending this webinar, you've doubtless seen the Claranet website, so thanks to the efforts of our marketing team, you are probably aware that we have a cloud offering. What I'm going to talk about today is what we mean by cloud and the features of it that we're finding relevant to developers. I'm then going to run through a demo of our virtual data center to add some substance to the concepts and show you some of the practical differences our service provides. And finally, I'm going to wrap up with some discussion on why the technology platform is not the most important thing to consider when you're looking for a hosting partner. Of course, we're hardly the only cloud player in town. It's the word of the day. You've certainly heard of and quite possibly used some already. Perhaps even the notable online bookseller. Interestingly, at Claranet, we have provided some services with Amazon ourselves when it's the right solution. I'm going to discuss a few things that differentiate Claranet services for developers, but first I want to define our terms. It's been said that the reason it's called cloud is because everyone who looks at it sees something different. However, the closest thing we have to an accepted definition comes from the US National Institute of Science and Technology. They've identified 5 key attributes. 1. Self-service. Must have a portal or an interface enabling end users to provision their own environments without hosting provider involvement. Accessibility, and this means broad network availability, often, although not necessarily, through the public internet. Pooling. A pool of physical resources are shared between multiple users. Elasticity. So you must be able to expand when needed to accommodate burst traffic, but also reduce when less resource is required. The canonical example is obviously retail traffic around the Christmas period, which surges massively and then drops back to the regular level. And finally, metered. This refers to billing, and means that resources are abstracted into clear billable units, for example, billing by CPU hours. Any offering without all of these 5 characteristics is a virtualization platform, but not a cloud. Combined, they give you 3 key benefits. The ability to control costs, no unused capacity, and no unexpected CapEx expenditure on new hardware. And the corollary to that, scalability. And finally, rapid provisioning, no waiting on hardware or OS installations. That's the definition. Now, there are some cloud features that naturally chime in with the development community. Most of these are pretty clear for agile users, but there are benefits to the more structured waterfall approach as well. Rapid prototyping, using the self-service features. Using complete OS snapshots to revert, roll back and roll forward a complete virtual machine. Very much complementary to code version control systems. Easy scaling, ties into the removal of hardware reliance. And naturally the pay-on-use model, allowing you to match your resource requirements to your customer invoicing. A little more on reuse. So it's an axiom that good code is reused. On the one hand, no one wants to reinvent the wheel when there's a good framework or package that already exists. We're all specialists now. On the other, if you do produce something genuinely innovative, it's certainly going to be reused in its turn, either by you or your competitors. Cloud services are a great fit with that. Templates and snapshots can allow you to easily duplicate a working virtual machine, or even a complete environment for a new customer or project, giving you a substantial head start. If you're looking at providing software as a service, cloud gives you the ability to effectively copy and paste to provision a complete new environment for a new customer. So far so good, but there are several cautionary notes with using cloud. Unpredictable spend. On-demand billing is great in development for short-term deployments, but financial directors prefer a more predictable model. For production systems especially, if your bandwidth billing is discrete, as with Amazon, your monthly bills can escalate rapidly from traffic surges, and we've certainly seen our customers experience this. There are performance considerations. Dedicated boxes are fairly well understood, but the pooled nature of cloud means that you're sharing your resources with other customers and their workloads, which can be very unpredictable. Rogue clouds. Individual developers are drawn to cloud services benefits and accessibility for prototyping. This can mean that they're bypassing your defined development methodology and mean they're developing for an environment which is significantly different from the production target. Cloud adoption still needs to be managed as much as the older hosting methods. And there are other aspects to performance as well when developing for cloud. For example, you may well have a much looser coupling between machines than you're used to, resulting in higher latency. Message queuing models need to be tolerant of both higher latency and also more resilient in the event a target machine is unavailable. A lot of cloud providers want you to work with the assumption that no single machine is guaranteed, so your messaging and code needs to recover gracefully. And finally, as we've all read, this technology isn't immune to downtime of its own. You can develop around that, multiple availability zones in Amazon, for example, but again, there's complexity, risks, and costs to consider that can be forgotten in the rush to realize the more obvious benefits of cloud. Enough theory. To show you why cloud isn't just hot air, I'm going to give you a quick demo of our self-service portal. Here's the login page, nothing unusual, although note the language selection. We are localized to the countries in which we have a VDC presence. So after logging in, you see the home dashboard page, separated into 4 panes. From here you can get a very quick overview of exactly what resource you have available to your account or enterprise, your individual virtual data centers, how many virtual appliances you have running and their status, and a comprehensive event log. This is a dynamic interface, so if there are other administrators logged in and making changes, you'll see that reflected automatically. Maximizing the resource allocation panel, you can see the total resources you've requested from Claranet. This can either be a committed limit or burst, pay on use, or a combination of the two. The columns here show the metered resource atoms. Currently deployed or allocated resources shown in red, and available in green. Moving left to right, we have virtual CPUs, storage, or operating system disk space, memory or RAM in gigabytes, then external storage. This is for extra volumes you attach to virtual machines beyond the OS volume. Then VLANs, or subnets if you like, and finally public IP addresses, external IPv4 allocation. Back to the home page, there's the listing of virtual data centers. Each enterprise can have one or more virtual data centers below it. In this case, it's our product director's account. You can see that we have 3 VDCs, one in the UK, one in France, and one in Germany. Equally, it's possible to have more than one virtual data center in a single country and use them to keep the resources discrete between, say, customers of your own or even departments. Then we have the running virtual appliances, or VApps for short. You can think of VApp as an equivalent to, or a virtual equivalent to, a rack within a physical data center. A VApp is a container that you populate with virtual machines. It's a logical grouping that would typically be used for the combination of machines that's required to service a specific workload or for a project. For example, a simple web application VApp might contain a web server, a database server, and perhaps a firewall virtual appliance. Finally, we have the event log, which is pretty self-explanatory. Any actions taken by a user, from log in to log out and everything in between, are recorded here, plus any system events, together with a severity level. Moving away from the home screen via the tabs at the top, we have virtual data centers. Here we can access not just the VApps within our virtual data center, but also the networks and volumes. On the Network tab, we have 3 categories of network. Private ranges, so internal IPs, you can choose any private range you like. Here we can see the default 192.168.0 range. Public facing, so those are internet accessible IP addresses, and also what we call external ranges. External ranges are typically used for MPLS network integration, giving you secure, reliable access to your virtual data centers without traversing the internet. Each of the private and external ranges counts towards the VLAN total on the account for billing purposes. On the Volumes tab are the additional drives or LUNs which can be attached to virtual machines. These count towards the external storage total on the account. Here you can see we have one volume attached to a VM and one currently unattached. Moving to the VApp that I prepared earlier, I'll show you how easy it is to create and deploy a virtual machine. So on this VApp screen, you'll see 2 panes. On the left are the library images, which are the available images to deploy, and an area for the deployed and running machines within this VApp on the right. I already have a firewall and an Ubuntu server running here. I'm going to quickly add another server to this VApp. Let's say it's a database server. To do that, I'll first find an image. I'm going to add another Ubuntu VM. The platform includes full licensing for Windows, but Ubuntu is slightly quicker to deploy. Having found the correct template to create an instance of it, I simply drag and drop it into the right-hand pane. Then I'll save my changes. A green cross appears to indicate my new VM is ready to be deployed. Before I do that, I'll make a couple of configuration changes. Give it a name to identify it. And also up the resource allocation as it's a database server. We'll give it an additional CPU and take it to 2 gigs of RAM. I'll also assign a remote access password. This allows me to get a console view via the NC of the VM without requiring any client software. It's the virtual equivalent of plugging a monitor and keyboard into the back of the machine. I'll remove that description as it's too generic. Save my changes. And finally check that the network is set to use the firewall as its default gateway, which it is. So, you'll notice a new panel underneath the virtual machines when I have the VM selected, which gives me a summary of the setup with my amended settings for CPU and RAM, a traffic light status currently red for undeployed, and the ability to pause, reboot, and power off the VM, and access the console that I mentioned as well. Also in the top right is the ability to create an instance or snapshot of the VM. Now my machine is configured, deploy it and actually start it up, I just click Update Running Virtual Appliance. And that's it. The process will take a few minutes to deploy. It depends on the number of complexity of machines you're deploying, but you can navigate away from it and continue using the portal whilst you wait. So I'll just do that now. The apps library, which is per virtual data center, is the set of virtual machine templates. There's a default set that we supply, but you're free to upload your own images in VMDK format, and of course you can snapshot configured machines to redeploy as well. The default images we have up here include a couple of different firewalls, as Viata and pfSense, Windows servers, as I mentioned, CentOS, Debian, a Netscaler load balancer, and the Ubuntu images. Then there's the Users tab. This account just has a single user on it. Users can be given granular rights to allow read-only access, for example. Then there's the Events page, which gives a more detailed view of the events audit trail summary from the home page, including the ability to search and sort. So here you can see the creation, modify and deploy events, which I just undertook on the VApp. Finally, there's a link to the cloud documentation site, which has comprehensive information on using VDC, including several video tutorials. And lastly, there's a support pop-up, which includes an email link to our 24/7 service desk. So, that's a pretty quick tour of the portal. I hope it's given you an idea of both how simple it is to use and the control that it offers. So the interface is good, but why should you use it? We've talked to our customers, and the key concerns they have around cloud services are security, reliability, geography, the location of the data within the cloud, integration with existing IT assets, especially network integration, and fear of being locked in with the wrong technology or provider. We've designed the Claranet Cloud to address those key issues. We call our cloud enterprise class. And by that I mean firstly that we provide a clear availability SLA of 99.95% on the platform, backed up by service credits. We can do that partly because we're not using no-brand, low-end commodity hardware. All of our VDC storage is NetApp, Compute is coming from Intel-powered Dell servers, and we have Cisco and Force 10 switching, and our hypervisor is VMware. Also, all resource provided is dedicated. We never over-provision on memory or disk. Our cloud is integrated. I mentioned the built-in MPLS connectivity, allowing a Claranet cloud-hosted service to easily be an extension of a private network. But in addition, we also offer easy integration with dedicated hardware for a hybrid solution. For example, if you have SQL database servers which need absolutely predictable performance, we can run those on hardware and keep the cloud flexibility for your other tiers. Our cloud is open. Not only can you upload your own VM templates to the repository, you can also export snapshots of your virtual machines and run them elsewhere. And our cloud is local. This is an important point for any businesses who are concerned with data protection and regulatory legislation, which most of us now are. In the demo, I showed you an account with VDCs running in the UK, France, and Germany, all managed from the same interface. But where you put the data is entirely under your control. We host VDC in the same named Tier 3 data centers we use for our other managed services, and we won't move your environments, unless you want us to. Those are some of the key features about the Claranet platform. But there's much more to choosing to use cloud and selecting a cloud provider than just functionality and technology. So thinking beyond the clouds for a moment, development doesn't happen in a vacuum. Ultimately, code needs to be deployed for end customers. And we think that's most easily done if your development platform is the same as your testing platform, is the same as your production platform. That's why we've designed our service in the way we have, to have both much of the flexibility of other providers, but also a strong SLA and reliability to back that up. Once your application is tested and deployed, what then? We're a managed service provider, so whilst we're happy to provide infrastructure as a service, we can also go beyond that. We have a wealth of experience in application management, guaranteeing the uptime not just of our platforms, but also of the code running on it, even your custom code. We're not developers, and we never will be. But we think that application development and application management are different skill sets. You can think of it as the difference between hunters and farmers. The developers are fast, agile, goal-focused. The farmer is focused on a different skill set, more process-bound, providing full 24/7 support, looking to the changing seasons with lifecycle management and platform scaling. In summary, I hope this has given you some useful information on both the benefits and caveats of this changing technology, but also why changing technology is only a part of the picture. We still need to look for partners who are a good strategic fit, and always keep in mind when choosing a platform and partner that delivering service is the end goal of development.
Okay, hope everyone can hear me. Thank you very much for Ralph for that interesting presentation. By way of introduction, my name is Richard Moore and I'm the marketing manager here at Claranet, and I will be chairing the next 10 minutes or so of Q&A. And the first question we have here from Mr. Oliver Bordet from Red Development Limited is, what development languages does Virtual Data Center or Claranet support?
Okay, Richard. Well, for VDC as a whole, it's infrastructure as a service, so you're free to use whatever environment you're comfortable with. With Amazon, so talking about developer languages, for pure VDC, anything. For our managed services, we chiefly support web-based applications, both sort of the normal Windows stacks, so IIS, .NET, SQL, and on the Linux side, the LAMP stacks, including PHP, Perl, Ruby, MySQL, some customers with J2EE environments. We're quite flexible on the custom code side of things, so we operate a runbook-based model. Anybody familiar with ITIL will have doubtless encountered runbooks. Essentially, if we can codify it such that we have monitored events and define the actions that we'll undertake when those events occur, we are pretty flexible in our support. So I hope that answers that question.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much, Ralph. The next question we have in here is from Mr. James Grisbrook from Liquid Spring Technologies, and he is asking what development tools come with Virtual Data Center? Quite an interesting question. So, Ralph, what are your thoughts on that?
On the development tools side, you're free to use whatever environment you're comfortable with. With Amazon, as I alluded to in the webinar, to get the most out of it, you really need to be thinking about using their enterprise service bus or message queuing. VDC is intended to be a lot closer to the type of private cloud you'd run on your own sites, so that really there are no special development tool requirements beyond the hopefully fairly user-friendly portal.
Okay, brilliant. So the next question we have in here, there's quite a lot of interesting questions here, so actually this is quite good. Who do you work with? I think that's a question really referring to kind of what kind of customers and what developers do we work with?
We have quite a number of customers or quite a number of web or internet developers. Often we work in a sort of a three-way relationship, if you like, with our customers, where they have a developer on board already that they'll bring to us. And from a support perspective, as you move over into the application management side of things, it's important that we are able to maintain that relationship in both directions, providing a bit of balance. With others, we work with in-house teams. One example I'd like to use, I don't know if we have anybody from them online at the moment, is a company called CDS, Connect Distribution. CDS are a big distributor of white goods, so if you've ever had a problem with a fridge, freezer door, or a washing machine, you may well have actually ordered a part from them. They came to us with an in-house package which managed the dispatch and the databases of their white goods. What they came to understand was that they'd actually developed a platform which had much wider applicability than just for themselves, and they've now rolled that, so they're effectively a software as a service provider as well as keeping to their core business. So essentially quite a large range of developers and development environments.
Brilliant. So the next question, and for anyone there, this is the final question. So just a reminder to anybody, so everyone listening, there is a button on the top right hand of the screen that you can press to submit a question. So if you haven't done so to date and you would like to get a question addressed, please do so now. That's just kind of a preamble to the final question that we have in here. And this question is a good question in terms of, it asks us, so we claim we can guarantee uptime, but how do we go about guaranteeing uptime for custom code? So Ralph, what are your thoughts on that?
Yep, that is a good question. For us, this is about our managed application hosting, or MAH for short service. The key component of this is that we mandate a completely discrete live environment. So typically you'd have a three environment set up here. Development, which is pretty unfettered access. You need to keep the agility there that I was talking about earlier. Then a staging, which could also be combined with a user acceptance test environment. Now, for staging in UAT, we allow developers access to put their code releases onto it, to stage their code releases onto it, and that's where the testing takes place to ensure that the code is doing what it's supposed to. Finally, there's the live environment, and the key thing here is that we do not allow developers to have root or administrator access to a live environment. And this can be a bit controversial, but we find it's the only way that we manage the code release process from staging to live, and ideally we do that using an automated tool, say Capistrano for an example, checking out from the same code repository that has been had the code released from staging. Because of that, we can also very easily roll back the code if it turns out that it does adversely affect the application, so it doesn't impact the SLA. And essentially that's the root of how we're able to offer a guarantee of uptime on code that we haven't written ourselves.
Okay, so hopefully everyone can hear me okay. We've got another question in here from Mr. Jason Downey, and he's I think expertex.co.uk, and he's asking, how is the service charged for, and how do your costs compare to the likes of those of Amazon and Windows Azure? I suppose there are a number of elements to that question. Ralph, what are your thoughts on that?
Yep, there are a number of elements on that. As I alluded to briefly in the demo, there are granular atoms that we bill against for VDC. The CPU, which is billed in effectively in CPU hours, the RAM commitment for servers, the two types of storage, so the internal storage, the OS. There's also a fairly nominal charge per VLAN, and a public IP addressing charge. There's something missing from there that is a key component for your more traditional cloud services, and that's bandwidth. We don't explicitly charge for bandwidth on VDC, and this is quite important because that is the major source of variable billing with other providers, and it's out of your control. If you are extremely popular on Amazon, that can be great, but it can also have a very large associated cost because of the amount of traffic. What we have is a guarantee of bandwidth. It's kind of best efforts beyond 100 meg. We guarantee 100 meg of traffic. We are also able to provide dedicated firewall connectivity out of it if you do want, or do have expectations of particularly high bandwidth requirements. From a cost point of view, I will play the I'm not the commercial person card, and account managers are more than happy to talk to you about that to give you a direct idea. But it's a fairly open pricing model based around those atoms of billing that I mentioned.
Brilliant. So thank you very much, Ralph. I think that was really enlightening. It certainly was for me, and judging by some of the questions we've had in, it has been for all of the people online listening to us. So I put no more questions in, so I think this is only for me to draw us to this webinar, this Claranet webinar presentation to a close, and thank everyone very much for attending. I hope you had an enjoyable, useful session. That's it from myself and Ralph. For further information, please, as Ralph mentioned before, go to your account manager if you're a current Claranet customer. Visit claranet.co.uk where you can submit some inquiries over our website. We'll also be sending you an email to follow up this webinar, and it will have details of an on-demand video on our YouTube channel, which can also take you through a virtual data center itself in maybe more detail or different aspects of it. There will be a link to our website where you can review the various pieces of information and documents that we have on there. And we'll also be sending you details of how you can set up a trial for virtual data center. So I'm not going to go into that in any more detail on this line, but when you receive that email, that'll give you details of how you can access virtual data center and do a trial. So thank you very much for attending, and I hope everyone has an enjoyable day. Thanks. Bye-bye.